I'm sorry about this.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. We will try again. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to me. We are continuing on 18 lines down on Yud Daled Amud Beis, but I will do my introduction a little bit quicker this time, right? We had mentioned that we were trying to figure out the opinion. What is it? Rav says in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, that if I shecht an animal on Shabbos, I cannot eat the meat on Shabbos. And we were trying to figure out why. We suggested potentially it was because of a muktzah problem, but then we said it can't be because of a muktzah problem because that would be the same issue if it was shechted on Yom Tov, right? If it was a muktzah problem, then I couldn't eat an animal that was shechted on Yom Tov either. So now we are suggesting that it's Rabbi Yehuda who is talking about kalim. And we learned in Maseches Kalim that, Maseches Shabbos, it's Maseches Shabbos about kalim, that if I have a utensil that was once used for a specific purpose, like a container that is used to knead dough, and then it breaks into pieces. So if it can still be used to knead dough or hold a smaller item, smaller cooked food, then it is still a utensil, and it's not muktzah according to everybody. And the same thing with glass. If it was holding a container to hold things, and now it can still hold oil, so smaller amounts, but it's still a utensil that holds things, for sure that's not a muktzah problem. However, if the utensil is broken and it can't hold anything, it's broken, can't be used for anything, that's for sure muktzah according to everybody. The argument is, what happens if it can still be used as a cover, but it's not able to be used as a utensil that holds things? That's where the Tanna Kama says that it is not muktzah because it's still a utensil, and Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it has to be the same type of utensil that it once was. So that's where we're picking up. Mein malach done in. That means that the item, in order for it not to be muktzah, has to be usable in the same type of malacha that it was, same type of use that it was before. Me'ein malacha cheres lo. But if now it's usable for some other purpose other than what it was able to be used for before Shabbos, then it is now muktzah, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Alma, so that is to say, kevin delo itchon me'esmol lahach malacha, since on Friday afternoon it was not set aside for the purpose of this malacha, right? If I had a piece of pottery that was used to knead dough in, it was not a cover. So now I can't change it into a cover on Shabbos. That is muktzah. So therefore, Asiri cannot move it, and it becomes muktzah. So hachanami. So then let's say the same thing when it comes to shchita. Kevin delo itchan me'esmol, since it was not set up as food, nobody could have eaten this meat before Shabbos, so then it was asura, it becomes prohibited to eat on Shabbos as muktzah. That's potentially the Rabbi Yehuda we're talking about. Amalei Abaye says to Rav Yosef, Midami, how can you compare those two cases? Hasam, over there by the broken utensil, me'ikarakli, v'hashta sheverkli. There's a big change here. It was a utensil, now it is a broken utensil. V'havale nolad. So therefore, it is now what we call nolad. It is born new and fresh, right? It is not the same thing it once was. That's what Rabbi Yehuda's point is. It was a bowl. Now it's a cover. New thing. Therefore, once you establish something that's brand new, that didn't exist before Shabbos, that is muktzah. The usr. So it becomes muktzah and it's prohibited. Hacha, but here, when it comes to the meat, meikara uchla, at the beginning, we said that the animal was meat, right? Even though it wasn't shechted and able to be eaten, it was meat. Levasof, at the end of the day, or during the day of Shabbos, ochel, now it becomes meat. Uchla de'ifrasu. All it is a smaller piece of meat taken off of a big piece of meat, right? You had one big cow, now you got a steak. That's the same thing.
Medium rare.
Right? So that Rabbi Yehuda said wasn't muktzah either. He said if I've got a big bowl, and now I have a small piece that I can still use as a bowl, that's not muktzah. So therefore, how can I say that this piece of cow is now muktzah? V'sham inon leila Rabbi Yehuda de'amar uchla de'ifras shapir dami. Right? And we even have a proof that such a concept, where I have a larger food, which is now broken into pieces of smaller food, that is not muktzah, that it's permitted, and it's not considered to be nolad. It's not considered to be a brand new thing. It's not. We learned in a Mishnah, also in Masechah Shabbos, a lot of Shabbos stuff. Ein soch dinas haperos. You're not allowed to squeeze fruits and get their juice out on Shabbos, right? That's a prohibition called schita. Schita is a derivative of the prohibition called dosh, which is threshing. So if I take an orange and I squeeze it in order to make myself freshly squeezed orange juice, So then that is prohibited. Mi de'oraisa. Okay? Lahotzi mehan mashkin, right? That is, right? You're not allowed to squeeze them in order to get liquid out. Vim yotzu me'atzman. Now let's say you cut your orange in half and some juice drips out. So asurin, it's prohibited for you to drink that juice. Rabbi Yehuda says,
even though you're intending to cut it and just
that's the first opinion.
It properly, and then
that's correct. That's the first. The first opinion says don't drink that juice. Rabbi Yehuda says no, not true. Im la'ocholin. So then, if the orange was an eating orange, hayotze mehan mutter, then what comes out of them is fine, even if it's juice, right? Im lamashkin hayotze mehan aser. If it's for liquid, then it becomes prohibited. So let's take the obvious example, right? Oranges are a great example because there are different types of oranges. Everybody knows that many oranges are grown in California, and then there's oranges that are grown in Florida. California oranges, right, are useful for eating, right?
Blood oranges.
And the blood oranges, all that type of oranges are good for eating. You peel them, they have a nice thick peel, they come off and you can eat the oranges. Then there's Florida oranges, which are juicing oranges, right? You make squeezed juice out of them. So if I've got myself an eating orange that's designated for eating, so then even if I cut it and juice comes out, it's an eating orange, therefore the juice is not, you don't have to worry about the juice.
Think about your hand.
And I would say that even, let's say, for example, practically speaking, I've got fish, right? I've got a lemon. Sometimes I can squeeze a lemon and it's fine. Sometimes I can't squeeze a lemon. Let's say, for example, I've got my tea and I'd like to squeeze some lemon in my tea. So I've got food and I squeeze a lemon into my tea. Can't do that because now I'm squeezing food into liquid. That I can't do.
Squeezing a lemon to your beer.
However, that cannot do. Correct. But let's say I've got a piece of fish, and that's food. I'd like to squeeze some lemon on top of my fish. I can squeeze my lemon onto my fish because I'm squeezing from food to food, and I'm not making it a liquid in between. And so therefore, that would be permitted. Okay, so that's the distinction. So that is what Rabbi Yehuda says, that if you separate food from food, it's fine. So therefore, if I had a big animal and I do shchita and now I've got a piece of steak, so why would it be prohibited? It's just food from food. So lav itmar Allah, didn't we explain about this Mishnah? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, that Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, Mordechai Rabbi Yehuda lechachamim besali zeisim v'anavim. That Rabbi Yehuda would agree though, let's say we had a circumstance where we had a basket of olives or a basket of grapes. Now olives and grapes, generally speaking, are widely used for squeezing, right? You squeeze olives and you make olive oil, you squeeze grapes and you get grape juice. That is commonly done. So therefore, even though this guy plans to eat his grapes or eat his olives, Rabbi Yehuda will say, we will not let you use the olive oil that comes out by itself from these olives or the grape juice that comes out by itself from these grapes, despite the fact that this guy wanted to eat them rather than to drink them. Since it's common that people drink from them, he might change his mind. And so therefore, he's going to be extra strict when it comes to grapes and olives and say don't. Alma, that is to say, kevan de lischita kaimi, since they are supposed to be right used for squeezing, yohiv da'ate, he's going to change his mind. So hachanami, so here are two, right? This would be the same thing by our animal. Kevan de lischita kaima, since the animal is able to be used for slaughtering, so then, right, even though, right, he didn't set it up before Shabbos for that purpose, so then, yohiv da'ate, right, he may change his mind and use it for that purpose. So therefore, right, we should make a gezerah. You're not allowed to use, so just like we make the gezerah, you're not allowed to use the grape juice or the oil because you might come and in the future squeeze grapes, squeeze olives on Shabbos intentionally. So why don't we say the same thing by the animal? If you accidentally do shchita on the animal, you forgot, accidentally, you do it b'shogeg, right? You do the shchita on the animal, you shouldn't be allowed to eat it. Why? Because since animals are commonly shechted, so if we let you eat this steak, then maybe another Shabbos you'll come to make a mistake and you'll do shchita and you will eat it. So midi hu taima el larav. 1 second. Remember, this whole idea was, this is Rav explaining Rabbi Yehuda. Hamar Rav. Rav says, Cholok haya Rabbi Yehuda afilu b'sali zeisim v'anavim. Rabbi Yehuda himself, Rav holds that Rabbi Yehuda did not actually prohibit grape juice and oil. He said they didn't make a distinction. Even the grape juice and the oil that comes out of the olives and the grapes, even that's permitted. And therefore, there would be no reason to say that you couldn't eat this meat on Shabbos. So therefore, we still have no reason to understand. We still don't understand why it would be that if this person forgot it was Shabbos, shechted the animal, why can't you eat it on Shabbos? What's the problem? It's already shechted. So we'll try again. El Amar Rav Sheshes Braid Ravidi. Rav Sheshes, the son of Ravidi, says, Rabbi Yehuda de Nerosi. It's Rabbi Yehuda about the candles. What's Rabbi Yehuda about the candles? The Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Metaltel ner chodosh. They used to have. I should have brought it with me. They used to have a container, right? It was like it looks like the genie of the lamp from
Aladdin?
Aladdin, exactly. If you can imagine what that looked like, right? I was like, I don't understand why that's a lamp. It looked like a container with a little spout on the end, but that was a lamp.
It's like a kettle thing.
Yeah, so I'll bring one. I've got actually one from the time of the second Beis Hamikdash. Somebody once bought one for me as a present, and it was like it's a legit lamp from the second Beis Hamikdash. And what you do is you would pour oil into it, and you'd stick the wick on the other side, and they would hold it. And the reason it has the spout is because that's where the wick would come out of, and you could just walk around holding your flashlight in the dark, right?
Makes the genies come out if you do it rubbing.
Does not make it. I've tried. There are no genies in mine. So, in any event, okay, if you have a brand new container, a brand new, it's commonly made out of pottery, because it can be made out of pottery, it can be made out of metal. You don't want to make them out of wood because it'll catch fire, right? You make that out of pottery, out of metal, non-flammable materials. So if it's brand new, so then you're allowed to move that on Shabbos. It's not muktzah, right? Because you can use it for other purposes. It doesn't have already like soot and used up oil that's sitting in there. Like it gets gross on the inside after you use it a while, right? So therefore, if not, you can like pour things into it in order to hold. You can use it as a container for other things. So therefore, since it's usable for other purposes, it's not muktzah. Aval lo yasham, but not an old one, because old ones already have been used, and they have like soot on the inside, and they have mush from the wicks on the inside. So therefore, you can't use it for any other purpose other than lighting a fire. And so therefore, this is muktzah machmas iser, right? It's designated for a prohibited purpose. And therefore, since you can't light candles on Shabbos, therefore this lamp becomes muktzah. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. So therefore, let's say that's the same thing about this animal that is shechted on Shabbos, right? Since you're not allowed, since it's prohibited for you to shecht an animal on Shabbos, so then the animal becomes muktzah on Shabbos because there's an isser, right? It's muktzah machmas isser. So getting that meat is going to require you to do a prohibition. So therefore, the animal becomes muktzah because it's prohibited, and therefore the steak, after you shechted it, even if you've done it b'shogeg, is prohibited to be eaten because it's muktzah machmas iser. Okay, that's Rav Shesh's suggestion. Amar deshmat leRabbi Yehuda muktzah machmas mius. Okay, so now Rabbi Yehuda is saying that it's prohibited to move this candle, he says, only in the circumstance where it's muktzah not because it's isser, it's muktzah because it's disgusting. That was because the lamp was already used, and therefore the reason why you can't use this candle for anything is because it's gross, right? You don't pick up garbage and move it around. Things that are gross, you just don't touch. So therefore, that's why he wouldn't touch it. Muktzah machmas isser mishmatle, but does he have such a concept that there's something which is prohibited, therefore I can't pick it up, right? Then it's not necessarily the case. So therefore, this animal wouldn't necessarily be muktzah machmas isser. So the answer is yeah, Rabbi Yehuda does have such a distinction of muktzah machmas isser. Ditnan, we will learn in a Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says, Tesvav 15a, Kol neros shomatechas, any metal utensils, any metal lamps, metaltalin, chutz min anir shaliku bo be'oser Shabbos, you're allowed to move them around, right? Except for one that you already lit on that Shabbos. So now, the ones that are not lit on Shabbos, so it can be used for other purposes, but once you've used it on Shabbos, you had it lit when Shabbos started, so now you can't use it for anything because it's on fire. The only way for you to use it would be for you to put out the fire. Putting out the fire is an isser. So therefore, you cannot use therefore, you see, Rabbi Yehuda holds that something which cannot be used, because in order to use it, you'd have to do a prohibition on Shabbos, becomes muktzah. Therefore, the cow, where you have to shecht it, which is an isser, in order to use the meat, is asser muktzah machmas isser. Okay, so that is Rabbi Yehuda. V'dil mashani halsam, maybe that's different. Dehu dachi le biyadayim. When you light the fire in the lamp, you're taking a action in order to prohibit this lamp, right? The lamp by itself is sitting there as nothing. But once you light it on fire, now you've made the lamp into muktzah. The cow, you didn't do anything to make it prohibited. It just was, right? So therefore, maybe it's different. Maybe it's only muktzah if you actively do something to the item to make it muktzah, but not if it just is by default. So that doesn't prove anything. Elam Ravashi. Ravashi says, Rabbi Yehuda de Mevashel he. This is Rabbi Yehuda about cooking, and this is where we end up. Okay, this is Rabbi Yehuda about cooking. Tonight we learn a Mishnah. Hamavashel b'Shabbos. Let's say somebody gets up in the morning and he cooks on Shabbos. B'shogeg, but he did it b'shogeg. Every day he gets up, he makes himself scrambled eggs. He gets up this morning, he makes himself scrambled eggs. He sits down, he opens the newspaper, and he sees, it's Saturday's newspaper. We used to have newspapers back in the old days, so.
Yeah, right. like the Metro, which used to be a Toronto newspaper.
Okay, so there you go, exactly. So now, he does it b'shogeg. So then, what's the halacha if you forget it Shabbos?
You can't get it from it.
So the first opinion is yochal, you can eat it. B'mezid, right? If you did it on purpose, you got up in the morning and you made yourself intentionally scrambled eggs. Lo yochal, then you cannot eat it. Nobody can, right? Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's what Rabbi Meir holds. So Rabbi Meir says, if you did it on purpose, you gotta throw it away. Okay? If you did it b'shogeg, then go ahead and eat it. Right? You weren't a rebellious person, so go ahead and eat it. That's Rabbi Meir's point of view. Right? There's a chart on the bottom there in the notes. Yeah. Rabbi Yehuda says no. B'shogeg, if you do it negligently, yochal lemotzei Shabbos, then we're gonna punish you because you weren't careful. Therefore, you got to put these eggs away, and you can eat them after Shabbos. Okay, so don't use them on Shabbos.
Are you getting something from eating Aren't you gaining from it if you're eating after Shabbos?
So that we always say that you have to wait kadei shiyasu, the amount of time it would take to make the eggs. So you don't even get to save the time, right? So you gain nothing out of it, right? The malacha doesn't help you. B'mezid, now if you do it on purpose, lo yachal, then the person who made the eggs, he can't eat it. Olam is forever. He's never allowed to eat it. But other people can eat it. Okay, so once you do it on purpose, you've lost.
So I guess you made it for someone else, basically.
You've basically made it for someone else. That's exactly right. Rabbi Yochanan Hassan Dalar Omer, Rabbi Yochanan Hassan Dalar says, B'shogig, if you do it negligently, Yochel Motzi Shabbos, La'achirim Velolo. He says then, if you do it negligently, then you have to wait till after Shabbos. But he disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda in that he says that person himself can't even eat that, right? Other people can eat it. And however, b'mezid, if he does it on purpose, lo yochal, lo lamis, lo lo v'lo lachir, nobody can eat it ever. Throw it away. That's what Rabbi Yochanan, he's the strictest. Okay, so now.
Okay, there goes my head.
What we've got, according to this, is where we've got Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, right? That if you did, you shechted this cow, right? And you did it b'shogeg, negligently, then you can't eat it on Shabbos. You got to wait till after Shabbos, and that's how we're establishing why Rabbi Yehuda says that's why Rav says that Rabbi Yehuda holds that this is prohibited. Very good, nice and simple. Okay, here's where the question is: V'nukma b'mezid v'Rabbi Meir. Rav says that this idea that you can't eat the steak from this animal that you shechted on Shabbos is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, which means that we're talking about it was done b'shogeg. Okay, but we also saw that Rabbi Meir also says that there's a circumstance where you can't eat a cow that you shecht on Yom Tov. What if you do it on purpose? According to Rabbi Meir, right? Rabbi Meir says, he says if you do it b'mezid, if you do it on purpose, even Rabbi Meir says you can't eat it that day, right? Nobody can eat it that day. You got to wait till nightfall, according to Rabbi Meir. So the answer is lo salka daitach. Nope, we can't establish it according to Rabbi Meir because we don't want to make it bemazed. We don't want to make it a circumstance where he did it on purpose. Why? Diktani, because the Mishnah that we were started with was Dumya de Yom HaKippurim. We were talking about similar to a circumstance of Yom Kippur. Because we said if you shecht it on Shabbos or on Yom Kippur, you cannot eat it. So we want to say that it's the same thing as Shabbos and Yom Kippur. Ma Yom HaKippurim lo shna b'shogeg lo shna b'mezed lo achil. Just like on Yom Kippur, it doesn't matter if you shecht it b'shogeg or b'mezed, you can't eat it. Why? Because you can't eat on Yom Kippur, period. You just never can eat on Yom Kippur. So it doesn't make a difference whether there's no issue of prohibition on the animal, right? It's just prohibition of eating. So therefore, afhach, we rather say that the case of Shabbos is also a circumstance where nami lo shna b'shogeg lo shna b'mezid lo achil. Doesn't matter if you do it negligently or on purpose, you cannot eat it. Therefore, it stands to reason that we're going according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, because Rabbi Meir allows a person who does it b'shogeg to eat it on Shabbos. Rabbi Yehuda will be the one who says that a person who eats it b'shogeg has to wait till after Shabbos, and a person who does it b'mezid can never eat it, even after Shabbos. So hachi kamar. Right, so, okay, sorry. But 1 second, you're now establishing this as negligent? Look what the Mishnah says in Rabbi Yehuda, and this is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. The Mishnah says that even though you're chayav misa for shechting the animal, you can't eat it on Shabbos. It's kosher, the shechita is kosher, but you can't eat it on Shabbos. Well, 1 second, you're chayav misa. When are you chayav misa? You're not chayav misa b'shogeg. So the answer is no. Hachi kamer. This is what the Mishnah means to say. Even though shechting on Shabbos is such a severe crime that if you did it on purpose, you'd be chayav misa, hacha de b'shogeg, but now you're doing it b'shogeg, shchita so kshira, your shchita is still kosher, and you still can't eat it on Shabbos. Gotta wait till after Shabbos, but your shchita is kosher. The animal doesn't have to be thrown away. V'nokma Rabbi Yochanan Sandalar. Still, we've got another choice. Why don't we establish it according to Rabbi Yochanan Sandalar? Da'amar lo shna b'shogeg v'lo shna b'mezid lo achil. He says it doesn't matter b'shogeg or b'mezid. Nobody's allowed to eat it on Shabbos. You got to wait till after Shabbos, right? So Rabbi Yochanan Sandalar kamaflig b'motzei Shabbos lachirim v'lo lo. So 1 second, Rabbi Yochanan Sandalar makes a distinction though. Rabbi Yochanan Sandalar says that after Shabbos, if you do it b'shogeg, you can eat it, if you do it b'mezid, you can't. Tana didan, shchita so ksherik tani. Our Tana makes no distinction. Our Tana just says, hey, it's kosher, you can eat it. Right? Lo shna lo v'lo shna lachirim. It doesn't matter if you do it or other people do it. Rabbi Yochanan Sandalar says you do it b'shogeg, even after Shabbos, you can't eat it. Other people can. So therefore, our Mishnah seems to be going according to Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so that is the end, case closed on that point. Let's talk about cooking on Shabbos while we're on the topic. Tana, we learned, the Tana taught as follows. Kami de Rav. They used to, when they would get up, Rav was an Amora, and he would get up in front of everybody to do a public discourse. And what they would do is they would have a Tana. This was a fellow who was an expert in memorizing all kinds of Mishnayos and Braisos. And he would say over the actual text of the Mishnah or Braisa to him. And then, right, then the Amora would say it out loud, right, loud, and then Rav would explain it. That was the procedure. So now, the Tana, this person who was reading the Braisa, he was in front of Rav, and he said, "Hamavashel b'Shabbos b'shogeg yochal." Somebody who cooks on Shabbos, b'shogeg is allowed to eat it. B'mezid lo yochal. If he does it b'mezid, don't eat it. Umashtik le Rav, and Rav told him, "Be quiet." Right? We don't want you to teach the brisa like that. Now, my time amashtik le. Why didn't Rav like that? Right? I mean, sounds like it's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Maybe it's because he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, right? So Rabbi Yehuda holds that, right? If you do it, even if you eat it, if you make the food b'shogeg, you can't eat it on Shabbos. You have to wait till after Shabbos, right? And this brisa isn't going according to him, but Tana Tani Rabbi Meir. This Tana is going according to Rabbi Meir, who said that you can eat it on Shabbos. So therefore, he didn't want to say anything. He didn't want that out loud. Well, 1 second. Why is that such a problem? Misum desvira like Rabbi Yehuda, man detane Rabbi Meir mashtikle. Just because he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, somebody who says a brisa in the name of Rabbi Meir, he tells them to stop? I mean, all he has to do is explain to everybody, hey, that's what Rabbi Meir holds. It's not a problem that somebody disagrees with him. Why does he have to tell him not to say that? Ve'od, and furthermore, misavar like Rabbi Yehuda, even still, Rav doesn't even hold like Rabbi Yehuda in any event. Why would Rav tell the person who's reading the Brisos to stop saying something just because it doesn't go according to Rabbi Yehuda when he himself doesn't go according to Rabbi Yehuda? V'amar Rav Chanan bar Ami, when Rav Chanan bar Ami said, Ki mori lehu Rav l'talmidei, when Rav was in private and teaching his own students, moru lehu Rabbi Meir, he would tell them that the halacha is like Rabbi Meir. Meaning you can eat it on Shabbos. If you cook b'shogeg, you can eat it on Shabbos. V'chitarish b'pirko, when you go out in public, so then Dorish Rabbi Yehuda, he told everybody the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. So he himself held like the halacha was Rabbi Meir, but he told everybody to be more machmir. Just better tell everybody, just don't eat it. If you make your food b'shogeg, we don't eat it. Halacha, practically speaking, for us nowadays, we hold like Rabbi Yehuda, right? If you do a malacha on Shabbos, b'shogeg, you're not allowed to benefit from it while it's still Shabbos. Okay? So, Mishum Arts, and why do you do that? Because there were people who were not experts, right? And they didn't know the difference in shogeg, mazid. So he just said, you know what? If it is made on Shabbos, everybody just stay away from it. Now, V'chi tema tana b'pirkei tana kamei. Maybe, right, what was happening is this Tana was in public. Rav was standing there in public, and he didn't want everybody to hear Rabbi Meir's opinion because he was telling everybody the halacha was like Rabbi Yehuda in public. Atukuliyama l'tana taisi. Nobody hears what the Tana's saying. The Tana's quiet. He says the brisa. Rav hears it. Then l'amoroi taisi. They hear what the Amora says. He's the guy who says it loud for everybody to hear. So he didn't have to tell the Tana to stop talking. He just would have had to say to the Amora, when you say it out loud, don't say that part out loud. Right? He doesn't have to tell the person who's doing the brises not to say it. So what's going on here? So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Tana, we learned that Tana holds shochet Tana kame derav, right? This Tana was teaching this halacha of shechting on Shabbos in front of Rav. Hashochet b'Shabbos, if somebody does shchita on Shabbos, not hamavashal, but hashochet, he was shechting on Shabbos, b'shogeg, and if he does it b'shogeg yochel, you can eat the meat. B'mezid lo yochel, if he does it on purpose, you cannot eat. V'omar le, and he says, my da'atech, what are you saying? You're saying to Rabbi Meir, you're holding like Rabbi Meir because you think that b'shogeg you can still use it on Shabbos? Ad kan lo kashari Rabbi Meir el b'mamashal. Rabbi Meir only allows you to benefit from a prohibition on Shabbos when that is cooking. Deroi lakos. Because ultimately, before you cooked it, you could have eaten it raw. Yeah, it would have been disgusting, right? I had a piece of raw steak, right? But they have such a thing as they call it tartare or whatever it is. Right? They eat
tartare, for example.
Right? Is that what it is? Right? You have like raw steak. So therefore,
yeah, tartare. Yeah, like raw tuna. Raw tartare, like raw tuna.
Raw tuna, right? So that's what they have raw. So you could theoretically eat the meat raw, and so therefore, as Rabbi Meir says, since you could have eaten it raw, if you cook it now, okay, you can still eat it, right? But aval shochet, when it comes to shchita, you can't eat the animal before it's shechted. Why? It's Eiver Menachai. Even if you were disgusting and took a bite out of it, it would still be Eiver Menachai. And so it would be prohibited. So you can't. So therefore, Rabbi Meir holds that shchita is worse than cooking, right? Because it does more to make the animal edible than cooking it does. The steak, before it was not really edible, and now it is very edible, right? The raw meat, the cow beforehand is completely inedible, and now it's a little edible. That's much more significant. Okay, right? Now, the Hamas Nisin, what about our Mishnah, Deshochet, who our Mishnah is talking about Shchita, and V'amar Rav Huna says, Dorash Chia Barav Mishmei Derav, that Rav Chia Barav said in the name of Rav, Asura Ba'achila Liyoma, that you're not allowed to eat this animal today. V'naspin Chavraya Lememar, and all the Bnei Yeshiva came around and said, Rabbi Yehuda, this is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. So that means that is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, Rabbi Meir Shari, which would mean that Rabbi Meir would permit it. So how can you say that Rabbi Meir doesn't permit if you shecht? It seems clear from this statement that Rabbi Meir would permit it. So the answer is Kishari Rabbi Meir. When Rabbi Meir permits it, Tesvav Beis, Kegon Shahaya Lo Chola Mi Be'od Yom. That was when the animal was already sick on Friday, right? So therefore, it was 100% ready to be shechted, right? You wouldn't. I'm sorry. No, not the animal was sick. A person was sick, right? You had a sick person, and he might need beef in order to be able to survive on Shabbos, right? I don't know, medicine was different back then, right? So he's going to be stuck. So therefore, since you know you've got a sick person, this cow is practically set aside for shechita already. Because you know that if the person wakes up in the morning on Shabbos and he's sick, you will shech the cow for him. Because that is pikuach nefesh. And there's no problem with that. So therefore, that's why Rabbi Meir holds in that case that if that the cow was practically edible, therefore if you shech the b'shogeg, it's mutter. Ihachi, if that's true, my time of the Rabbi Yehuda Dasar, then why would Rabbi Yehuda say it's prohibited? I mean, if it's practically permitted, why is Rabbi Yehuda saying that if you do it b'shogeg that you can't? So the answer is kigon shahaya lo chola v'hivri, because you had a sick person, right? Friday night, you wake up Shabbos morning, he's feeling much better. Oh, okay. So now Rabbi Yehuda holds, we go back to the way it was. If you shecht it, you've done an avera, not a good thing. Therefore, don't eat it. Rabbi Meir says, but the cow was set up to be slaughtered because you had a sick person, and therefore it's permitted. Okay, so that is why we hold it's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Okay. But, in fact, if there would have been a legitimate, would be no sick person, right? So then even Rabbi Meir would, in fact, hold that you couldn't eat it on this Shabbos. Okay. Now, that which Rav Acha bar Adda says in the name of Rav, Amri La, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Adda Amar Rav, and some said it was Rabbi Yitzchak bar Adda in the name of Rav, Hashochet lechola b'Shabbos. If somebody does shchita for a sick person on Shabbos, Aser lebari, a healthy person is prohibited from eating it. Right? Now, and a mavashal lechola, if you've got a sick person, you've got to cook for him, then mutter lebari. Then a person who is sick, then the person who's healthy can eat from it, right? So bottom line is this, right? You've got a sick person who needs meat. You shech the animal, and nobody else can eat it except the sick person.
But shouldn't you have someone?
But if
it's for a sick person, but you're a yid, right? Shouldn't you have someone who's not Jewish cook it for the sick?
We're talking about shechting, right? And you can't have a non-Jewish person shecht it. Remember?
I mean, you said cooking.
Cooking, okay. But can you have a non-Jewish person cook it?
If you turn on the oven,
you have a bishul akum, but you can't turn on the oven. It's also Shabbos. So therefore, whichever way you go, you're going to have a Jewish person doing the avera, right? Okay. But it's different when it comes to bishul. If you have a sick person and you make him a steak, and the guy takes a few bites and now he's got leftover, a healthy person's allowed to eat it. My time, what's the reason for that? Because because it's like we said before, the meat was edible when it was raw. Sure, people don't like to eat it that way, but it was food. And now that you've cooked it, you've just made it better. So therefore, a healthy person is considered to be able to eat this. However, shchita, you're taking the animal from completely prohibited to becoming edible. So therefore, the healthy person cannot eat it. Okay. So therefore, the animal which is alive is completely muktzah for the healthy person. So, Amar Rav Papa, so Rav Papa adds on, Pamim shashochet mutter. Sometimes you can have a circumstance where shchita is actually permitted, right? Kegon shayelo cholami ba'od yom. Let's say we actually had a sick person on Friday. Okay, so now the animal is ready to be eaten if you need it. And so therefore the shchita is permissible on Shabbos for that sick person, right? Other people can eat, but that sick person can. Mevashal aser, but cooking might be prohibited. Kigon shekotzotz lo dlas. For example, a person gets sick, right, on Shabbos, and now you've got to get food for him and cook fresh food, and you cut a gourd, you harvest a gourd. It was in the ground, and you harvest it.
Gourds are not kosher.
Gourds are vegetables, so they are kosher, right? So this gourd was attached to the ground when Shabbos started, right? So it was inedible, right? So therefore, if you cook it for a sick person, then the sick person obviously can eat it because that is a what do you call it? Pikuach nefesh, right? But for the healthy person, it's completely muktzah item, right? So you can have the animal you knew when Shabbos was coming in that you might shecht it, so therefore it's not really set aside as not food, but the gourd is completely set aside as not food. Okay, so that could be one circumstance. Amar Rav Dimi min Ardai. Rav Dimi from Ardai says, Hilchasa, the halacha is, Hashochet lichola. If somebody shechts for a sick person b'Shabbos, on Shabbos, muter lebari be'umtza, right? So a healthy person is allowed to eat the meat, right, when it's raw, right? Because since you knew that the person was sick beforehand on Friday, so you set aside the animal and you said, I might need to shecht this on Shabbos. So therefore, it's not a muktzah problem. It's not a shechita problem because you shechted it for the sick person. And so therefore, it comes out, there's no problems and you can eat it.
Carpaccio, that's the Italian food, but it's also eaten raw.
But there you go. So whatever it's called there. So there.
Only the sick person, no?
So now we're saying that even a healthy person, right? Even in that circumstance, you could. We said, oh, this is Rav Dimi from Nardai's opinion as to what the halacha is, that you can. My taima, what's the reason why? Is because kevan di'ef shirley kazayis baser below shchita. I mean, you can't get even the smallest piece of meat without shechting the whole animal. So therefore, the shchita for the sick person is completely mutter. So now, it's not even a shogeg problem. There's no, Rabbi Yehuda wouldn't tell you can't eat this animal because it's not even a shogeg. You're completely permitted to shecht it. It's not muktzah because you knew you had a sick person on Friday, so you knew you'd be shechting it on Shabbos. So then it's completely fine. Ki kashachit adat dechol kashachit. So when you shechted the animal, you were doing it for the sick person. However, if you now take the food, the steak from the animal, and you cook it on Shabbos, so then asur lebari. Now the healthy person cannot eat it. Why? Shema yarbe bishvilo. Because you might think to yourself, how much is the sick person going to eat? A little piece. I'll make a big steak. That way I can have leftovers and I'll eat it. Can't do that.
Couldn't there be Shabbos separating good with bad? Because within the animal, you have the forbidden fat, when you're separating the good from that.
Remember that when we'll talk about Bora when we get to Hilchos Shabbos, but you can always take good from bad, right? You can always take the good stuff out. So if you opened up the animal and you cut out the piece of the animal, the rib steak that you want, right? And then you soak it and salt it or roast it or whatever it is to get the blood out, right? That you can all do on Shabbos. That wouldn't be a problem, right? There's no separating there. Okay, so. That is.
You could have the same reasoning with the shechting the animal before. Put aside the animal. And think that, okay, I'm going to give it to him, but
but you really need to have a person, right? In other words, you can't just do that, right? And say, oh, I might shecht it on Shabbos. No, you won't, because there's no sick people. You're not going to do it, right? So if you didn't, you could indeed have a muktzah problem. But since you had a sick person, there's no muktzah problem, and since you have a sick person, there's no shechita problem. Therefore, I mean, there's no such thing as shechting it for a little piece or for a big piece, so therefore the entire animal is shechted, it's fine. But once you're cooking, if you cook this much, that's fine. But if you cook this much, now you're violating Shabbos by cooking more than you need to. So therefore, that's different. Okay. Says the next Mishnah. Hashochet b'magal yad. If you do shchita with a hand sickle, what is a hand sickle? So, right, you have these big sickles. You have like they're curved on top, right, and you use them in order to harvest, right?
It's called a sickle.
A sickle, right? It's a hand sickle. It's like a half moon shape, like the death guy. He holds one of those things, right? It's half moon shape. That's a farmer's sickle. That has a.
You use it for wheat and stuff.
So that is the hand one, right? So this is the hand one. You have the one that looks like the hook. There is the hand one.
They make you for cut wheat with whatever it is.
Correct. Now, apparently, right, there were two sides to it. right? So he's got like this. He's got potentially, he's got a hook potentially at the end of it like this. So on this side of it, you're not going to be able to do shchita on it because he's got this hook. This is Rabbi Gershom's explanation. It's a good one, right? So he's got this hook because if you do shchita with that, you're going to hook the trachea and the esophagus and you're going to rip it open, right? But on this back side, it was also sharp. This side you could do shchita with, okay? So if you're using b'magol yad, you can use the magol yad, you can use a hand scythe, sickle, scythe, right? But sur, you can use a rock, ubekane, or with a reed, a very sharp reed. Shchita so kshira, then your shchita is kosher.
If it goes in, the way out, you could get hooked.
Yeah, but we don't have to worry about that, right? Because once it's shechted properly, then you're good.
But the hook could get caught in something.
On its way in, that would be a problem, right? So that's why you have to worry about the one side of it, but not the other side. Hakol shochtin, everybody can do shchita, like we said before, even somebody who is a mumar, somebody who is rebellious and doesn't always eat kosher shchita. Uliolam shochtin, and you can do shchita at any time, as we also said, day or night. Ubekol shochtin, and you can use any material as a shchita knife, a rock, glass, a reed, like we said. Chutz mimago katzir, except for the harvest utensil for the harvest scythe, right? That was a very large scythe, right? And it would have a serrated edge on the inside. Okay, that was more like this one, right? And it had a serrated edge on the inside. Can't use serrated edges for shchita, right? Because you'll tear the trachea and the esophagus, not slice the trachea and the esophagus. So that's no good. Can't do that. V'ha-magera. Also, you can't use a magera. Magera is a saw, right? So, right, same idea. It's got teeth, right? So that you can't use that either, right? V'ha-shinayim. Also, you can't use the animal's jaw, right? They would, I guess, could sharpen teeth of an animal on a jaw of an animal and use that as a blade. Can't use that because also it's serrated. V'ha-tziporen, and also a fingernail, right? Tziporen, that is, or I guess it's, tziporen is a hoof, right? Tziporen is the hoof of the animal. So you can't sharpen that and use that either. Mipnei shem chonkin, because those will tear the trachea and the esophagus. They won't be sharp enough to be able to go straight through.
But doesn't the Kahal use the
fingernail? Correct. That's correct. And you can't, if he does that on a bird for regular, it's treif, no good. If he only allowed to do that in the Beis Hamikdash for korban olah and a korban chatos for birds. Otherwise, it's completely treif.
What's the difference between that and using other materials? We said we could use other materials.
Correct. So these are because these materials seem to be that they are by definition serrated. Mm-hmm. Right? They're not going to be sharp. They're not going to be sharpened. Right? They're going to tear, and they're not going to, and it's not going to make a clean cut. Says the Gemara.
It's not so kind of dry.
Hashochet di'eved in. So now it says in the Mishnah says somebody who uses this hand scythe is okay. Now, when we say the word hashochet, that means one who does it. It's okay. That means you're not supposed to, right? If you did it, then it's kosher, right? But di'eved in lechatchila lo. But di'eved it's fine. Lechatchila don't do that. Now, why? Bishlama b'magol yad. I understand why you can't use the hand scythe because you might flip it and use the wrong side, right? So better don't touch it. Just don't use it. Get a regular knife. Okay, if you did and you used it properly, then it could be okay. But better don't. But a rock, a sharp rock, or a reed, you can't use it. Or in here, we have a contradiction to that. The Mishnah, Brisa says, "Bakol shochtin." You can use any material for shchita. Bebetzor, bebeschuchis, bebekrumis, shelkana. You can use a rock. You can use glass. You can use a reed, a sharpened reed. So lo kasha. So it's not a contradiction because kan betolush, kan b'mechubar. It depends on if you've got one that is attached to the ground or one that has been removed from the ground. A stone that is in the ground, that's very sharp, cannot use for shchita. A stone that is detached and you've made a knife out of it, that you can use. Okay, so that's the difference. Da'amar Rav Kahana says, and we will see why later on in the Gemara. Hashochet b'mechuber lakarka if a person does shchita on using something that's attached to the ground, Rebbe posel, Rebbe says that's puzzle. Rabbi Chia says that it's kosher. Ad kan lo kamachshir Rabbi Chia, and even Rabbi Chia, who says it's kosher, only says so ela b'diavad. That's not ideal. If it's attached to the ground, you're not supposed to use things that are attached to the ground. But if you did, you're not supposed to do lechatchila. But b'diavad, it's kosher. So that's our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says b'diavad, if you had a rock then that was attached to the ground, then b'diavad, it's okay. When we have the brisa that says that you can shecht lechatchila with a rock, it's talking about you made a nice carved rock, very sharp, and then you could use it lechatchila. So b'mayo kimta, how did you establish our Mishnah? Ki Rabbi Chia, you said it was like Rabbi Chia, who says diavad, who says that it is only b'diavad, ella haditanya. But one second, what you're saying is things that are attached to the ground, ideally you cannot use. So we learn in a brisa. Bakol shochtin, you can use anything for shchita. Bain betolish, bain bemechubar. Doesn't matter whether it's attached to the ground or not. Either way, you're allowed to. Bain shasakin lamala vatzavar behema lamata. Doesn't matter whether the knife is above the animal and the neck is below. Bain shasakin lamata vatzavar lamala. It doesn't matter whether the animal is above the knife and the knife is below, or the vice versa. Right? You could have an animal where the knife is below it and the animal is above it. That's okay for shchita. You can also have a circumstance where shchita is where the knife is above and the animal is below. Either one of those is okay.
Like a sitting cow, like a sitting cow was lying on its back.
Sorry?
Like a sitting cow was lying on its back.
Right.
Easier, no?
It is. That's generally speaking. If you take a look at videos of how they do the shchita, they take the animal and it flips over. How they do it that way. Money, so, and we'll see why it actually comes as a better way to do it. So money, whose opinion is this? So then it comes out, lo Rebbe, velo Rabbi Chia. It's not Rebbe or Rabbi Chia, because Rabbi Chia, if it was Rabbi Chia, we said Rabbi Chia diavad in. He says, okay, you're not supposed to use it if it's attached to the ground, but b'diavad it's kosher, lechatchila lo, but not in the first place. And this is saying even in the first place you're allowed to use it if it's attached to the ground. Rebbe, and if it's Rebbe's opinion, diavad namilo, you couldn't even use it at all. So therefore, who's the opinion who says you can do it in the first place? So the answer is Liolam Rabbi Chia. So it is Rabbi Chia, and we're going to make a distinction between two types of utensils that are attached to the ground. Even in the first place, first of all, no. Rabbi Chia holds that even lechatchila you can do shchita. Now, the Mishnah is talking about b'diavad. The Mishnah is saying b'diavad you can do shchita that way. But why are we talking b'diavad if he holds even lechatchila you can do shchita that way? The answer is because he wants to show you how much Rebbe, who says you can't, holds. Rebbe says even b'diavad you can't. So they say, b'diavad, can you do it? Yes. Even lechatchila you could. Rebbe says, no, you can't. Not even b'diavad. That's why our Mishnah does it that way. Now our Mishnah says that when you do shchita, right, b'diavad you can do it, and lechatchila you can't. So then, lo Rebbe v'lo Rabbi Chia, it doesn't follow Rebbe's opinion and not Rabbi Chia's opinion, because Rabbi Chia, because if it's Rabbi Chia's opinion, afil lechatchila, he says even lechatchila you can. And our Mishnah is saying that lechatchila you cannot. Rebbe, if it's Rebbe, diavad namilo, and if it's Rebbe, even b'diavad you cannot. So the Olam Rabbi Chia, no, it is Rabbi Chia. Afil lechatchila masnis niktani shochet Rebbe he, and the Mishnah, which says that you shacht it and b'diavad, right? You're able to shacht it. That's Rebbe's opinion, who says you can do it b'diavad. One second, Kashi Rebbe al Rebbe. You just contradicted Rebbe, because you said before Rebbe says you couldn't even do it b'diavad. How are you explaining Rebbe's our Mishnah who says b'diavad you can? So lo kash, it's not a contradiction. B'mechubar meikaro kan betolush v'lasof chibro. We're going to make a distinction between two types of utensils that are in the ground. You can have a utensil that's in the ground and you put it there, right? You could have for example, you're building a wall, and in the wall you make a knife that sticks out of the wall, right? So the knife gets, cemented into the wall. It's now stuck to the ground. It wasn't always stuck to the ground. You put it there. That's one type of stuck to the ground. The other type of stuck to the ground is you've got a rock, which is a cave, naturally part of the ground, never was removed, and you sharpen the wall of the cave so that now there's a knife that's sticking out of it. That is mechubar for always. Okay, and that we're going to make the distinction. If it's mechubar from always, so then that's where it's acceptable b'diavad. But if it was removed, sorry, that's where it's not acceptable, right? That's where Rabbi says it's not acceptable. But if it has been removed and now you stick it back in, so then that's where Rabbi says, okay, b'diavad, that's kosher. Okay. How do we know we make a distinction between things that have been removed to the ground and things that are still that were and then reattached versus things that were attached the entire time? Right? How do we know Deshani Lon Bain Mechubar Meikaro Letolush Lasof Kibro? Titania, we learn in a brisa. Hashochet b'muchni. Exciting cases. I am going to use a wheel to do shchita. Shchita so kshera. The shchita is kosher. So now, b'mechubar lekarka, shchita so kshera. Then it says, so now it says, b'mechubar lekarka, if the knife is in the ground, shchita so kshera, the shchita is kosher. Not sakim bakota v'shachit la. If I stick the knife in the wall and I shacht it, shchita so kshera, the shchita is okay. Hayat sur yotzim min hakosel. If there was a rock that was coming out of the wall, okana olam ilav, or there was a plant that was coming out of the ground, v'shachat bo, and you do shchita with that, shchita so psula, then the shchita is no good. So kashan hadadi, you've got a contradiction there. You on the one hand said that you are allowed to do shchita on the things that are in the wall, that are attached to the wall, and then you said you're not. You see the difference is shani bein mechubar meikaro. There's a difference between the cave, which was attached to the ground in the first place, talush l'masoch libro, and something that was not attached to the ground, and then you attached it, right? So then that is puzzle, right? So then that's shma mina, right? So that's kshera. Sorry, the one that is attached, that you reattach it, it's kosher. The one that is from the ground the entire time is puzzle. We're going to see why that is in a moment.
What's the difference in in the criteria of the two objects? Why the one that's attached to the ground?
Yes.
Versus the one that you put into the ground.
That's coming up.
Oh,
so Gemara is going to explain that.
For the wheel,
yes.
If it's spinning in one direction, then it's not coming back and forth.
Yes.
So I'm going to catch it.
So let's say our case here. First of all, this is what it looks like. Okay, this is your. We're going to talk about two different types of wheels, right? This one makes more sense, right? According to what your question is. This is what we call a potter's wheel. Okay, and the potter's wheel, right? What they would do is he would use his feet to spin it back and forth, right? And then that would cause this to spin, right? And then that he has here, turning a gear. And then the gear, he's got a knife. Now, if he spins his feet back and forth, then he can get this wheel to turn back and forth. And then that makes good sense. The wheel here, not so, right? You can't really, because once you open up the water, and the water comes out and it turns the paddles, when you've got a knife attached to one of the paddles, and now it swings around and shechts the animal with the spinning wheel, the wheel only goes in one direction, right? So we're going to have to go back to our old answer. He's got to have a longer knife, potentially, right? That's got to be a good answer, right? We had that answer by the wall. We really couldn't use the other answer where it ricochets, where we said before, it seems clear he's got to have some kind of a longer knife in that circumstance. Yeah. So that's what our Mishnah is going to say. We'll finish off with this last piece. No, let's stop here. We'll stop here and we'll go through these two cases.
Basically, he's doing it with his foot.
Correct. He's spinning it with his feet.
Okay to do with your foot?
So, yeah.
You don't have to do it with your hand?
Doesn't.